All right, so I'm an artist from the Department of Art, and I have basically a single project that somewhat inadvertently intersects with your universe, and it doesn't really intersect with it through games so much as virtual environments. I mean, the Institute here has virtual environments and games, and so had it not included that, I might not be here. And I'm just going to read to you what it is I'm doing, and I do, I think you'll either find what I'm doing to be insane or amusing. I hope you find it interesting. Marching Cubes Made Physical is an interactive installation that permits direct physical engagement with the Marching Cubes algorithm, a language that defines our virtual environments. It generates dialogues about the ways in which information technologies create the building blocks of contemporary culture. And that's my leading statement in a kind of grant application version of the project. What I'm going to show you today is, in 5 minutes, is a kind of summary of my trajectory through this. And again, I should acknowledge that I'm not a kind of computer scientist, I'm not a coder. I come from the world of architecture, and that's where my interest in this began. And in my normal presentation actually begins with an explanation of marching cubes, which you may not need, or you may certainly don't likely need explanations of algorithms, but normally I'm presenting to an audience who doesn't know what an algorithm is. And so for my audience, it's important to kind of do this graphically. And the way that I do that is the way that the Marching Cubes algorithm, which basically takes a collection of points in space and makes a surface. I mean, in 2 dimensions, it takes an area and it divides it into quadrants. And if you intersect that area, sorry, I'm looking at my slides, I don't need to do that. With any kind of arbitrary surface, it approximates it. If you do that for all possible intersections of 4 quadrants and surfaces, you end up with a set of approximations that can be used to build kind of any area. And I use this 2-dimensional explanation because the 3-dimensional version of that is harder to visualize and harder to see, but essentially the logic is the same. If you have a 3-dimensional space, a kind of voxel space, and you divide it into 8 quadrants, intersect that with a surface, you end up with a series of approximations. And for those of you that are kind of algorithmic experts, I think that basic logic will be familiar to you. What may be novel, and what is novel for me, is this doesn't have a kind of physical interpretation. I mean, this precisely because it was designed for a virtual realm. And as a person in the building realm, the material realm, I'm interested in what this could do, what this could make physically. And if you take a look at this kind of diagram, what you realize, of course, is you have 2 volumetric interpretations, one that's positive and one that's negative, or more accurately, one is the kind of reciprocal of the other. And you can identify 19 unique shapes that exist, as a result. And this is where I'll kind of make a few large leaps. As an architect, what that immediately suggests is how concrete is made. Concrete is made by building the kind of reciprocal shape of what you want, filling it with concrete, pulling apart the formwork, as it's called, to make an object. And that's what I did quite a long time ago now, not actually in 2013, in 2009, kind of create an installation of objects that are derived from this algorithm. And this is just curious because, of course, this algorithm has nothing to do with physical space. It's about representing physical space in the virtual realm. And my interest is simply to reverse that relationship because we spend so much time in the virtual realm today, and we actually live that experience day to day on our screens, I'm interested in how to give people access to that algorithmic logic through physical objects, through tangible objects. And I can sort of see Josh and I have only just started to talk, and there's certainly a clear connection between the 2 of us in the notion of transformative play. And so this is the earliest installation of this project. And this is a kind of smaller version that maybe shows how it's scaled a little bit better. But basically what you're looking at is a series of units that are derived from how Marching Cube subdivides a volume. In creating this installation, we had to sort of run through a series of permutations of what we would make with these units. And in doing that, we kind of this was actually done with a collaborator in 2009. We realized that it was really fun to make little 3D printed versions of what we could make and then start to assemble even larger, mini installations in advance of this larger thing, which is kind of like time intensive and expensive to make, so we were only going to do this once. And that realization that this could become a toy, and in fact, had we thought this through a little bit more intelligently in advance, maybe we wouldn't have made a big, heavy concrete thing. What we could have made was a 3D printed plastic thing. Of course, this consumer level of 3D printer didn't exist at the time, but as soon as it did, went out and got one and started making the ABS plastic version of the same thing, a kind of toy-like installation of plastic parts. And where I'm at today is my next kind of installation of this, from this body of work, will be to make a really large scale. Of course, I'm here to have a fixation on scale, and to make a kind of human scale interactive installation that consists of these plastic parts that'll be have a more sophisticated connector, and there's sort of many things that aren't shown here, that users can then manipulate form on an app, kind of design something they'd like to see built. The app will provide them with a series of instructions so that they can then take the plastic toys and build something of their own design. And I may have been even under time. Questions?
Great. Questions?
Yes.
That's very cool. So I see the toy potential and the assembly desire that might be animated from it. Do you see there, or do you have any aspirations for pedagogical issues around the spatialization or materialization of algorithmic or geometric expressions? It occurred to me that Montessori education uses physical manifestation of algebraic expressions a lot for teaching
Yeah, the
math.
Froebel block is the Montessori kind of equivalent of this from in the early 20th century, and not at this time. I mean, they're certainly of interest to me. One of the interesting things about operating as an artist, of course, is I have my particular sort of fixations leading to, I'm looking to make an installation. But one of the reasons that I'm interested in this kind of work is it touches, a consumer product, it touches pedagogical tools, it touches, computer science directly through the algorithm. And every audience that I talk to has it's like, why don't you make a commercial toy? And I was like, okay, well, I could, and that's one, that could be great. And why don't you make extra? And that's actually what I'm interested in is how because I've sort of leapt through a few different realms, I end up perturbing everybody at the same time. I mean, my art audience is to a certain degree indifferent to this work in an interesting way, because they're like, well, it's like computer art. is an unfortunate reaction that one receives. So I don't have a research program, and I should say, as an artist in a university setting, I don't have a lab. I don't take in students. I don't have a research team. How I would work with you is actually kind of an interesting open question. I'm certainly interested in that.
I understand that you may have colleagues in the School of the Arts who do, like, in the music department, algorithmic compositions, which
Chris,
in some sense may be a musical notion of this. Do you have any thoughts or opinions about putting sculpture together with music in that regard?
Yeah, the person that comes to mind is Chris Dobrian, and the one difference that between us would be, of course, I have some other work that uses generative tools, form making, but they're not tools that I've designed. They're kind of packaged tools that I use to make form. And currently I'm not doing any work to sort of develop algorithms for form making. I'm simply taking a very simple and very early kind of tessellation algorithm and employing it. So it's almost the reverse direction, but we certainly have a lot of common ground to talk. It would be what the equivalent would that be for music, because music sort of takes in electronics and incorporates into analog space, whereas I think we'd have to find a practice that took digital music and sort of made it analog. I don't know what that is yet, but it would be an interesting question to ask.
I think Tim? Yes.
Yes.
Is in the music arena.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, tell me.
I went to school with Chris Dobrian
Okay.
at San Diego. So, what's the question?
No, I don't know. So what would be I guess the musical kind of analog of taking electronic music and kind of reinterpreting it as analog music? I think that's the question that comes to mind for me. I don't know if that's Walt's question.
It's a good question. I think there's a problem in electronic music right now, which is that there's a kind of intoxication with real-time processes. And so we're looking at a situation where we're trying to mediate between the fairly recent, 25 years ago, non-real-time processes and the real-time processes that have been developed. So we're in kind of a backward state where we are throwing away old research and essentially discovering that you can't create music that looks forward in time. Right? So you can't actually plan form if you've got an instrument that merely processes other instruments. That is, you can never produce what Bach would have called a retrograde.
Though Chris did show me a kind of predictive project that would
Yeah,
take
it's a very interesting idea, but it's naturally flawed until we discover how to do time travel. So
That's what we have virtual worlds
So
for.
this is a very interesting thing because it is a non-real-time thing. So it's a sculptural thing. So I think the trick would be to somehow invest the musical process in the same kind of procedural investment that you're doing, and then see what happens.
And on that
So
note,
with new tools.
I'm going to run, literally run.
Will you be able to come back later?
Yeah, I can come back for a bit of the lunch, and then I have another class. But
Okay.
I will be back
All right.
at noon.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.